Welcome to NFL Kickoff Live. It'll be the best 2 hours of football talk every single Friday, where we'll talk to you about the NFL. We'll go around and talk about every single team, every game, and get local insight that you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is Jarvis Davis and Kyle Krabs, and we are going to jump right into Thursday night football, where the Eagles looked like they would run away with it until they almost didn't.
As they say, wins don't come easy in the National Football League, and they don't come easy for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm Gino Camilleri from Locked On Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles squeak out one against the Minnesota Vikings, 34-28. Really, the score doesn't tell the whole story. The Philadelphia Eagles dominated in the trenches, especially midway through the second quarter, and then on after that. DeAndre Swift puts together a career-high rushing performance. The Eagles' offensive line put together an outstanding 2022-esque performance. When the pass game couldn't get going, they relied on the run. That opened up the pass. Devontae Smith has a killer long touchdown. And hats off to the defensive front. They knew coming into this game that the secondary was banged up, caused multiple turnovers on Kirk Cousins, got to him early and often, and the Eagles squeak out a win 11 days before they head to a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm Gino Camilleri. Locked On Eagles.
What's up, everybody? It's Luke Brown from Locked On Vikings, and I know that the Vikings lost 34-28 to the Eagles, another loss at the Link, and I know that it is super, super frustrating with 4 turnovers and giving up over 200 on the ground. Same exact game as last week, right? But there is something about it that encourages me. Something about the way that they threw the ball, about Jordan Addison, about Brian Asamoah getting more involved, what we saw from Ivan Pace, that makes me feel like all is not lost. And maybe that's just because the Eagles are a pretty good team, and they've got a lot of ways to beat you, and I thought the Vikings had an answer to most of those ways. Unfortunately, not all of them. But, hey, hold on to the football, and we're having a different conversation. And you don't get that one back, right? You don't get to say we're actually 1-1. But there's at least something encouraging moving forward. So, I don't know. We'll talk about it more on Locked On Vikings, but maybe I can call it a moral victory.
Well, guys, I guess you can call it a moral victory of some sort, but I sort of heard a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas in there at the end of the day on the Minnesota Vikings. But honestly, KC, you might be a little bit more worried about where the Eagles landed last night.
Yeah, so I think what is interesting about Philadelphia is reigning NFC champions. They play at New England, and then they come home and they have the home opener against Minnesota. And they kind of won ugly in both games. And I think there's credit that's due for winning ugly, working through kind of this transitional period. I think about Philadelphia, and I'm not worried, but I am looking at just kind of how disjointed things feel when your defensive coordinator gets the head coaching job in Arizona and your offensive coordinator gets the head coaching job in Indianapolis. There's obviously this transition that takes place. And I feel like Philadelphia is working their way through that. Now, the light bulb came on about halfway through the second quarter and said, oh, hey, wait a minute. Brian Flores is putting 6 guys on the line of scrimmage and 3 of them are linebackers. Maybe we should run the football. And that's how you end up running the ball for 259 yards. But I think just for Philadelphia, obviously with the expectations of Jalen Hurts, with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and Philadelphia coming out, I mean, they have 154 and 171 passing yards in their first 2 games. So with the investment that was made in Jalen Hurts, you're just waiting to see the first cohesive game that takes place. And I feel like until that happens, I'll just kind of be having an eye on the trending of that offense to see, look, are you going to just embrace this run first identity all the way out? Or is it going to click? And when does it click? And how does it click? And what does it take for that to happen?
Yeah, and I think I felt the same with looking at their secondary. There were times when, and like you mentioned, there were moments where Jalen Hurts connects with Devontae Smith and you think game over, until the Vikings come back with an answer and have a deep ball run back for a touchdown or a pass for a touchdown as well. And then you're thinking, whoa, what's going on with this Eagles secondary? But Jarvis, what did you see last night? I mean, did you see some things that, despite the fact that the Eagles are now 2-0, you have some concerns about if there will be some lingering issues as we move further into the season?
I mean, let's not get it twisted. Like, the identity of the Philadelphia Eagles is their defensive and offensive line, right? And then when things get awry or things start to look a little weird, and it's like, oh, Jalen Hurts on an interception. Oh, okay. How about we just lean on our offensive line to lean on those linebackers that they had standing up in the line of scrimmage and in those defensive linemen down there as well? Because I think Kyle makes a great point. Like when you have a team that makes it to the NFC Championship and to the Super Bowl, ultimately make it to the Super Bowl, those are some of the things that you look at, right? You look at those teams up front, and Philadelphia Eagles has the best offensive line in the entirety of the NFL. So, yeah, of course, it's okay for them to lean on that, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, I know Jalen Hurts got all the money. He got the bag and everything. I get it. I understand that. But when times are get tough, you're going to lean on what got you there. And what got the Philadelphia Eagles to that Super Bowl last year was their offensive and defensive line. So to be able to lean on the offensive line like you did, it was really cool to see DeAndre Swift to say, oh, this is the guy that the Detroit Lions drafted, right? This is who they wanted. Like, we were able to give him the ball 20 times. He's only had that happen one time before when he was with the Detroit Lions. So for him to be able to have a coming out party, so to speak, last night, I think it was just a really cool thing to see, because at the end of the day, like, the foundation of this team is the big boys. And I think that for us to for it to come out like the way it did last night, obviously Nick Sirianni, I'm sure, like, okay, well, I will prefer my quarterback not throw a pick, throw an interception, turn the ball over, or put the ball in the hands of in danger. But like, hey, I know where I can go to, and I know that I can count on DeAndre Swift going forward.
Indeed. And good to see a healthy DeAndre Swift out there for the Eagles. Now, speaking of health, unfortunately, not a good place to be for Aaron Rodgers as far as his health goes. Of course, he gets injured on his very first drive of his very first official regular season with the Jets. We now know that Rodgers is done for the season with that Achilles injury. But do we think that he might be done for his career? I mean, Jarvis, do you look at this and see this as a situation where that might have been, unfortunately, the last time we will see Aaron Rodgers on the football field?
I don't know. Just Aaron Rodgers kind of hit or miss. I'm not quite sure, because when you think about, going into the darkness and trying to figure it out, like, oh, yeah, let me go into the darkness and figure out whether or not I want to play or not. Oh, let me pick my team and where I want to get traded to. It just seemed like now, going Hard Knocks, like, oh, yeah, Hard Knocks, he was great on Hard Knocks, but, Aaron Rodgers is a smart dude. He understands that all the cameras are going to be around. So he's the type of guy who cares. I feel like he really cares on what people think about him. So I think that he went the extra step to be able to do that. So I think right now, where I think he owes it to New York, to come back, right? Because, like, hey, you got everybody on board. You got the whole building up there in New York, hey, saying, hey, Jet Life Stadium and all this stuff. Like, all of those people are counting on you to take this team to a Super Bowl. So I feel like, given what he's going to be asked of, and they say, hey, come through on your word. You said you want to add another Super Bowl trophy to that case. You should come back, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether or not he comes back or not, because, like I said, Aaron Rodgers likes attention, and he's going to try to get it any way he possibly can.
And Kyle, do you think that, and this is just, a little bit of a petty party there, but as many of us heard about what went on in Wisconsin, there was a bar that actually had some money on what might happen with Aaron Rodgers and those Jets, right? And so that story, to me, you're right. Aaron Rodgers kind of acts like he's nonchalant, but really and truly he pays attention. So I don't know, Kyle, you think he might have some extra motivation to kind of come back and show everybody in Wisconsin that, hey, I can be successful outside of Green Bay?
Yeah, I certainly think the longer it goes and the longer the speculation there is that says, oh, Aaron's done, 40 years old, Achilles won't happen. I feel like that's just going to push him further towards making sure that he does come back. Now, I do wonder if we will see the version of Aaron Rodgers that was the two-time consecutive MVP at the end there with LaFleur before the 2022 season, just because it is such a grueling rehab process, and he is at the tail end of his career physically, and your body's going to take a little longer to recover. So I think he will be back, and that's purely speculative on my part. I think the bigger question for me is, when he does come back, what does it look like? And I think that's the hard part for New York, with the position that they're now in, with what they invested to get him and how they've constructed the rest of the roster. And No, this transition with Zach Wilson right now is going to be really important, because if they're going to continue to maximize this window, not just for this year, but next year as well, when Aaron is potentially back, you got to know what you have at quarterback and what you don't. And I don't know how you know what you have with Aaron until he's out on the field.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know how you know what you have with Zach Wilson until this season actually commences and we kind of see him maybe midway through the season to see if some of what he's seen from Aaron Rodgers, whether that's work ethic, mindset, or all of the above, actually rubs off on him to make him viable as QB1. And then, Kyle, that's a conundrum that I think we'd all be interested in seeing. And I know personally, I would love to see Aaron Rodgers come back, just because I'm the kind of person who likes to see you go out on your own terms. And to see someone like him who's given so much to the game and who's given all of us a lot of great games and just historical memories over the years, I hate to see him kind of go down and I don't know, a pile like we saw him go down just this past Monday. But yeah, it just kind of begs the question of where do the Jets go from here? What's next for them?
Well, and you're even hearing the speculation of calling veteran quarterbacks, and then they're saying it's Zach Wilson's team. What happens if Zach Wilson's last year's Zach Wilson for 3 straight weeks? Is it still Zach Wilson's team?
Mm-hmm.
Are you calling somebody else? And if you do call somebody else, you got a bridge. What do you do with your draft capital? You don't have a 2 because it's going to Green Bay already. Like it's this really kind of, I don't envy the journey that it's going to take for them to try to thread the needle to get out the other end of this and feel like they've maximized the opportunity that they've laid out for them, which is tough because, you know, Joe Douglas had that killer draft in 2022 with Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson and the rest of that group. And I know there's enthusiasm about this year's group as well. But prior to that, you know, there were some tough swings and misses amidst some of the disjointedness of the Jets organization that, you know, when they invest what they did and went out and got Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb and Aaron Rodgers, and it was like, okay, like it's really tailored for this.
Yeah.
But now that the rug's been pulled out from underneath of that, it kind of creates this weird limbo with the roster as a whole that, it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances for anybody who likes good football, because the AFC East was going to be like prime time theater all season long with the caliber of the teams that division has. And we'll see what the Jets have to say about it from here. But it's obviously lost some of its gusto.
And Kyle, when you think about names like Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan's names being dangled around, like, oh yeah, maybe they should call Phillip Rivers. Like, whoa, isn't he teaching like high school football? Like he's coaching high school football right now. So when you start getting to the point where those type of names are being drawn out, like that's not a good look, because like you said, when you have put all your eggs in the basket with Aaron Rodgers, like things like this can happen. This is the NFL. 4 plays in, the man pops his Achilles. So these are some of the things that, you know, as a general manager, you have to be account for. So like, and I'm really interested, like I thought you make an interesting point, like as far as with Zach Wilson, like that was the miss, you know, to be honest with you. And now you're saying, okay, hey, we're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers, multiple MVP award winner, you know, Hall of Fame guaranteed type quarterback to come in and replace you. And then, he gets hurt. Now, like, how do you come back to him? Like, right, I know he's going to
go ahead, go get him, Zach.
Yeah, go get him, Zach. This is your team. Like, no, that's not real life. He's a human being. So I think that it's going to be really hard for Zach to really just win that locker room, so to speak, because so many guys came out, you know, whether it be from a source standpoint or just it was just the overall feeling like the defense felt like they couldn't win games with him. So now it's saying like, now you're asking him to come back and say, oh yeah, man, come win some games for us. Like, nah, it doesn't work like that, man.
JD, to your point, it was like March and April building up to the draft, and all of Zach Wilson's teammates are hopping on social media at every Aaron Rodgers rumor, and they're like, let's go, baby.
Let's go,
like,
bring him in, baby. I was like, what?
And now, and now you turn around.
Yeah, like,
Zach, like,
Zach.
You got it. You're the man.
Yeah.
So it's tough situation. And obviously the leadership of that organization with Robert Saleh. I like Robert Saleh as a head coach. I think he will do everything he can within reason to have it click into place, but they're going to have to change the style of football that they want to play. I think they're going to have to be ground and pound and defense and not lighten up the scoreboard with Rodgers anymore. I think it's going to be a little bit more methodical ball control. And can you trust Zach Wilson to not make the mistakes that cost you in those kinds of games? That's the big question.
And you have Robert
Saleh is fully healthy.
Yeah, and you have Robert Saleh with the experience that he had with San Francisco 49ers, where they had their own QB controversy. So sometimes you pull from that experience to help you to deal with a situation like this. And we will see. Zach Wilson will have an opportunity to show improve against the Dallas Cowboys in week 2. So here we go. Now, speaking of contenders or pretenders, well, we'll talk early returns from the Wild Wild West next. But first, Jarvis is here to tell you about our partners at Game Time.
Jarvis Davis here for Game Time. How about this, guys? Have you ever been in this situation? Hey, come, let me talk to y'all. Have y'all ever been in a situation where you need some tickets? You know, you really pressed, and like, because, you know, all those third party, you know, people coming in and running up the prices on the tickets. Guess what? Game Time has got you covered, because buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. It should not be stressful for you to go enjoy your team, enjoy the New York Jets, the Zach Wilson-led New York Jets. Yeah, go ahead and do that, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They always have killer last-minute deals, and you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun that you're going to have. So here's what I want you to do, guys. Make sure you check out Game Time, because it is the last minute ticket deal, and get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Game Time guarantees you'll get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Yes, you heard that right. Drop that code in, LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Guaranteed lowest price, good guarantee. San Francisco 49ers might be another good guarantee, because they came out in week 1. They looked like a top 3 team, not just in the NFC, but in the NFL overall. Now, this week, they got to travel down south to their division rival. They're going to take on the Los Angeles Rams. Now, LA did win their season opener as well against the Seattle Seahawks, but did those Rams show enough to tell you, KC, that they can actually contend with the 49ers?
Man, it's tough, because the Rams have historically had so much struggles head to head against San Francisco as a team. So I look at the talent disparity that's there. San Francisco, credit to Sean McVay, you know, they had all offseason long to cook up a killer game plan for week 1 against Pittsburgh, and they smacked them in the mouth. They did an awesome job. San Francisco did, or excuse me, Seattle with the Rams against Seattle.
Right.
But there's so many first and second year players and mid-round draft picks and undrafted free agents on that Seattle, or on that St. Los Angeles roster, that I just kind of have questions about how sustainable the performance that McVay was able to pull out of that group is. So I'm a little skeptical against San Francisco head-to-head. I do think the expectations for Los Angeles, the bar should probably be raised big picture, just not enough to chase down San Francisco.
Yeah, I think San Francisco is the team to beat. You know what I mean? Because, like I said, Rams, like, coming into the season, like, literally, I know I was thinking this, like, they are like, oh, they might be in competition for that number 1 overall pick, and you know, get Caleb Williams to stay in LA. He can stay exactly where he wants, stay exactly where he is right now. So, but I think, like, a lot of times people, you know, want to make big observations after the first game of the season, and I'm not one of those people. So I look at the game and say, like, oh yeah, everybody's talking about Brock Purdy, but you know, like, let's look at this thing, right? Like, let's here's who I trust. I trust Christian McCaffrey, 22 carries for 152 yards in the tub. So those are some of the things that, you know, Kyle Shanahan has been able to do. He's always going to run the football. He's going to run the football. He's going to have those hard sticks in the stomach of the running back. After they establish the run, they're going to pull that bad boy out, and they going deep. They're trying to get those chunk plays. And I think Brandon Ayuk has been doing an amazing job and saying, hey, yeah, y'all know y'all worried about Deebo Samuel. He's trying to get his money. But hey, what about me? Like, hey, I'm over here too. So I think that, you know, that's what I believe in. I believe in the Kyle Shanahan system, because that dude is an excellent play caller. And when you think about where they are as an organization, for them to trade a guy away before the season and trade Lance, and no, you don't even hear a peep as to job security and Kyle Shanahan, you only hear those two phrases put into a sentence. Yeah, it lets you know that, hey, the 49ers are a well-coached team. And I think, like I said, I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers in the NFL. So I think that's going to be the team that come out the West for sure.
And we've got some guys who have their eyes locked in on Rams, locked in on 49ers. Travis Rogers from Locked On Rams and Eric Crocker and Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers discuss how they see everything unfolding.
It's an interesting team, but they're well coached, and you can't take them lightly. And I think it's important for the 49ers. It might have been even better for the 49ers that the Rams won in week 1. So they would sort of mentally be like, hey, this is still a football team that's going to come out and play well, that can beat you if you don't play well. And we see that in the NFL all the time, the parity. And you think you know what's going to happen on Sunday, and the ball is oblong and it bounces funny, and you never know how things are going to go. With that said, I don't think I can pick against the 49ers in this game. They're favored by what? I think 8 points.
8 last I looked.
Yeah, on the road. The 49ers travel well. There's going to be a lot of, I don't think you can give the normal home bump in SoFi for the Rams, and because of that reason. So there's a reason they're favored by that much, and I think they should be favored by that much. And I think Kyle Shanahan's offense, with the way Brock Purdy has been playing, look good coming off of that injury. You get Nick Bosa now that's got a game under his belt, can probably play a pretty much a full workload of snaps. Man, Fred Warner was just unbelievable in that game. If they can cover up the Puka Nakuas and the Tutu Atwells of the world, the 49ers should be able to handle the Los Angeles Rams. So, I've got to take the 49ers by 10 in this one.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely outcome. The way that the Rams can win this is if they do find a way to keep guys like Nakua hot, if they do find a way to keep Matthew Stafford pretty clean, if they can get a takeaway at a key point in the game. But if it just comes down to a traditional our guys against their guys, the 49ers have better players right now. Now, like you said, Brian, this is the NFL, that even the best team and the worst team, the talent gap's about this big, right? That there's not a ton of difference, but the Niners might be the most talented team in the league. The Rams are a team, despite how good they looked a week ago, that I believe is still in transition. Now, I said if they could get through their first 6 weeks at 3-3, they got a really good chance to make the playoffs. And I think that they had to win that Seattle game. This is a game that I thought they might drop just because of the bad matchup, because of the talent disparity, because Cooper Kupp's missing some time. So they're about on track. And like you mentioned, lots of 49er fans at SoFi coming up on Sunday. I think the 49ers win. If the Rams do it, it's because maybe Brock Purdy gives a couple away, but I don't expect it.
Brock Purdy has been liable to put the ball in harm's way. Patrick Peterson, he was a guy who said he's going to get him, and there's a tail. 49ers went after him. He gave up 2 touchdowns. It wasn't a great outing for Patrick Peterson, but he did have a couple of opportunities to get his hands on some passes that he just did not capitalize on. So if the Rams have better fortunes when it comes to just kind of catching the ball, that is something that could potentially change the game. Now, like Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy, it feels like he's only going to give you 1 or 2 of those kind of opportunities. And if you don't take advantage of it, he is going to be efficient for the better part of this game. So that is one thing for especially a young Rams team that's trying to kind of get it together, especially at the linebacker position and at the secondary spot. You have to take advantage of those opportunities. I like the 49ers in this. Looking at the 49ers and just how they're built, it feels like right now a team that's just really difficult to beat. And I don't know if I'll pick a team to beat the 49ers for the remaining part of this year, because they're so sound running the ball. They're so sound in the passing game. They're so sound defending the run, and they're terrific defending the pass as well. They have guys that take the ball away. If when they lose, which I'm pretty sure it will happen, it'll be a little bit more surprising, but I'm not thinking that it's going to be the Rams this week.
So, Kyle, one of the things Eric mentioned was that word that we attribute to game manager, and that is efficiency. He used that word and Brock Purdy in the same sentence. Well, Brock Purdy did have what you could call an efficient game against the Steelers in week 1, 19 of 29 for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns, but still it was a good look against a Steelers team that didn't quite look like the Steelers we were accustomed to seeing. Nonetheless, can you look at that game and say that you believe in Purdy now?
I think Purdy's a really interesting case study. I think he has what he needs around him to play efficient football. And the vast majority of quarterbacks in the NFL I think are scheme-specific talents, and they're not transcendent. There's a handful of them that you could put in any offense across the league, and they're probably going to be a top 5, top 8 offense.
Yeah.
And you know who those guys are off the top of your head. We don't got to go there, right? Brock Purdy's not one of those guys.
Yeah.
But what he is a really good fit for Kyle Shanahan. And then Jarvis talked earlier about Christian McCaffrey, and you got Ayuk, and you got Deebo Samuel. And it's the plethora of ways in which they can beat you. You have to pick your poison on who you want to try to take away from San Francisco. And Tanitra, you mentioned the stat line for Purdy. He was 11 of 13 on passes further than 10 air yards downfield in that game against Pittsburgh, too. So this was not dink and dunk screen passes. And you saw a couple offenses that had that kind of approach in week 1. That was not Brock Purdy. So when Christian McCaffrey's humming, what that does to opposing linebackers and forcing them to suck up and fill the run, the middle of the field throws that this system is so well known for, Purdy does that well, and he's got a little bit of wiggle to him to be able to extend plays and kind of create off schedule when he needs to or make something happen. I think he's the right kind of balance between in-structure execution and outside of structure creativity with plus skill players around him that San Francisco is going to be a really difficult team to beat. I don't know if I'd go as far as Croc said and said I wouldn't pick any team on the schedule to beat the 49ers all season long, but they are a team that they have so many matchups offensively with elite offensive coaching and scheme that just, I think Purdy kind of sews it together really well.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because you always kind of hear people throwing back to, oh, it's the scheme. But if the scheme works and if the scheme is effective and the scheme gets you to, I don't know, places like the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl, I think the scheme is quite fine. And when we're having a conversation, as we did earlier in the show, about the 49ers possibly being, even this early in the season and even coming into the season, one of the top 3 in the NFC, if not the NFL. I mean, Jarvis, wouldn't you say that, hey, the scheme works and that this is a conversation that you can legitimately have about the 49ers being in that top tier?
Absolutely. Because look on the other side of the football. Yeah, Nick Bosa and all these guys, and you got some guys that can really, really heat up the quarterback. So I think that, that's another team, right? Oddly enough, teams that, focus in on, making sure the guys that are up front are able to do what they're supposed to do at a very good high level. So yeah, it is very good to say, hey, San Francisco 49ers are one of the better teams in the league. And like you said, and I think that, as far as getting over that threshold of getting past the NFC Championship into the Super Bowl and being able to finally close that bad boy out, is always going to fall back on the quarterback, though. It's going to be 1 or 2 plays. Kyle pointed it out. Hey, this dude got a little something. He got a little magic to him. And what you don't want is for him to play this well during the regular season, then get to that final game and then try to do a little bit too much on a play. And it really cost them. It essentially cost them a Super Bowl. So I think that Kyle Shanahan, I feel like he's playing a little bit with fire with these quarterbacks. But like I said, you can't play with what works, and he's doing what works. And I think that for that reason, I really feel like San Francisco has to be in the top tier in the NFC.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Good. I wanted to follow up off something you said. If the scheme works, I'm always kind of interested in the debate that goes around quarterbacks in general and using the scheme or the supporting cast as like crutches for the argument for why so and so. What does it matter? The whole point is to have the most effective offense. And you could be a guy like Josh Allen, who's got Stephon Diggs and a rookie tight end and Gabe Davis, and then he presses and goes outside of structure. And Bills fans at the end of the year say, well, imagine if Josh Allen had a wide receiver too, just as an example. And then you compare him to Joe Burrow and you say, well, Josh Allen's better than Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow's throwing to What does it matter? Who's winning the games? Who's performing more consistently? And that's not a slight at either one of those 2 guys because they're probably top 3, top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. But just this discussion around San Francisco, Purdy's the quarterback of an offense that's probably going to be top 5 in the vast majority of offensive statistical categories. I'm not saying that makes him a top 5 quarterback, but it doesn't matter where you put him on the imaginary list of the pecking order of quarterbacks, because the offense is what's going to help you win the games. And get you to potentially a 4th NFC Championship game in 5 years, which is what they're facing if they do that again this year.
Yeah. So
Because
if
at the
you're
end of the day, I just want to add this real quick, Kyle, to your point. At the end of the day, like all quarterbacks are scheme specific. Like there's a thing called the NFL draft. They go through this process to figure out whether or not they fit into their scheme. So, like, what are we really talking about when we talk about scheme specific quarterbacks? And I get that part of it, but like you said, I think at the end of the day, when it's not named guys like Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, like I think the coach tends to get a little bit more credit when in these conversations when we start talking about these things. So I think that's the only difference, really, because at the end of the day, like you're not going to draft a quarterback. Oh, he doesn't fit my scheme, but yeah, I'm gonna bring him in and try to make him, see if I can make him a good quarterback.
What's ironic is San Francisco did that with Trey Lance, and now here they are with Brock Purdy anyway.
There you go.
Fits the scheme.
yeah.
And nobody's talking about firing Kyle Shanahan or John.
That's right.
As long as Kyle Shanahan doesn't do a Kyle Shanahan, because when he Shanahan's, that's when it's a challenge for anybody. As the
bringing that up, T.
As Falcons faithful know it too well. Hey, Casey, I had to just go in on JD just that one time since we were talking about Kyle Shanahan. And yeah, he's kind of like the blessing and the curse. Yeah, I know, right? But listen, no matter what, you got to admit that the 49ers are one of the most well-rounded teams across the entire NFL, and they will be in the conversation at the end of this year, just like Prize Picks is a part of the conversation right now. So, Jarvis, I will step aside and let you tell everybody about Prize Picks.
Folks, people, listen up. I got something to tell you. Every time they put me on the screen by myself, I need you to listen to me right now. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Because guess why you need to go to their website? Because it's the most fun. I've had winning up to 25 times my money this football season. We early on, and I'm out here killing it. Why don't you? I need you to go there. So you just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Testing my skills on Prize Pick this football season, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you could turn $10 into $250. You could turn 30 into 300. You could turn 40 into 400. Y'all do the math on that. I'm telling y'all need to go to prizepick.com right now. Plus, they even offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. We going up. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePick.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, the daily fantasy sports made easy.
So if you are a betting person, you might have been looking at what was going on in the NFC East in week 1. Eagles, dub. Cowboys, dub. Commanders, dub. Well, Giants, I mean, not so much. Okay, sorry, B. Olsen and Boston. I mean, it is what it is, or it was what it was. But the Eagles have even started week 2 with a dub, albeit one where they had to escape to get a win with the Vikings. Now, Jarvis, you got to say, with what the East was able to do, it was a good look for them. But what do you make of the NFC East after week 1?
The Giants look awful. Like,
right there, like, you're gonna go right in on the boss and Eagles. Okay.
No, I mean, I don't.
Casey, we're not
right. We're gonna get a test coming up in just a second. But like, here's why I say it, because we had all the controversy coming into the season with Saquon Barkley. Do you pay him or you not pay him? You guys have meetings, getting flown out to Wyoming to have a meeting and talk about why running backs need to get paid, all that stuff. Just a lot of drama, right, with running backs. And for them to kind of work it out to kind of sort of maybe get them some more money, I guess, maybe, who knows, $1 million, I don't know. But, I think it's, and then we got what Brian Daboll did last year, right? As their head coach, he was the play caller for the Buffalo Bills. He came over, brought some excitement to the city. And then you go out there and lay an egg like you did. I just think that is something that you're going to have to really dig into, because you can't afford to be playing against your division rival in the Dallas Cowboys like you did. Like, that was a bad showing, and I think that there was a lot of discussion coming into the season as to who was going to be at the bottom NFC East.
Yes,
the loser of that game against the Cowboys probably might be it.
Okay, so now, Kyle, I'm going to go and swing the pendulum in the other direction, because you make a good point, Jarvis, where I don't know that we necessarily said the Giants would be that fourth team of the four, right? But there's always been conjecture about whether or not the Cowboys would be the first team, despite the fact that the Eagles went to the Super Bowl last year. But anyway, but as bad as the Giants looked, and as bad as they might maybe be, we don't know yet. This is week one. Swing the pendulum the other way, Kyle. Are the Cowboys as good as they looked in week one?
Week one is never, the highs are never as high and the lows are never as low, right?
Absolutely.
So credit to Dallas. They scored a touchdown on offense. They scored a touchdown on defense. They scored a touchdown on special teams in week one against the Giants. So you look at the statistical breakdown of the game. Dallas won 40-0 with 265 yards of offense. So grand scheme of things, Dallas comes out of this game. You love the fact that you won 40-0.
Sure.
Point differentials, I think, like the 11th tiebreaker down the road. So it's cool, but y'all got stuff to work with too. And I think that's totally fine. And I think the thing with the Giants is the Giants, I think they were who we thought they were, where you were concerned about the offensive line and young players, rookie center, second-year right tackle. They didn't look good up front. Daniel Jones got sacked 7 times. And on this very show last week, we talked about the Giants being further behind in their rebuild process in year 2 with this regime than what Philadelphia and Dallas, who have been established and have been competitive for several years, you are head-to-head going to be behind those teams. So you need games to break a certain way for you to win the football game. Giving up a touchdown in all 3 phases, that ain't it. So recorrect, recalibrate. And then for Dallas's perspective, it's going to be a good defensive test for them against the Jets. The discussion with this game is going to be Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson and how are the Jets going to move the ball. But I'm going to be looking at Dallas too. And I'm going to be really interested in seeing what that offense looks like. Brandon Cooks hasn't practiced thus far this week as of the Thursday injury report. And he was supposed to be a really big addition and catalyst to the offense. And he was very quiet against the Giants too. So I'm interested in seeing how Dallas attacks the Jets, how much success they have. I know they're a little banged up on the offensive line. The Jets have a really deep and explosive defensive line for rushing the passer. They're going to have answers to question. And I think just the way the game script unfolded last week for Giants and Cowboys, it's so hard to take anything definitive out of it because it was just such this unorthodox way to score a bunch of points. Mm-hmm. So I think Dallas is great. I think both them and Philadelphia are probably going to be 12+ win teams this year in the NFC, but I don't take too much out of week one other than Dan Quinn was back in his bag.
I think that is fair. I think that is very fair.
Yes. We're talking about Dan Quinn in this light, right? This is just, he's come such a long way ever since he got, laced with a whole bunch of talent on the defensive side of the football. And,
yes.
And I think that, when you have a team that's built like that and the expectations for the offense are hey, we need you to get on the same level as your defense. Versus when a lot of teams build their teams where they want the offense to be at a high level and the defense just to be able to make turnovers to kind of complement that, right? So I think that right now the Dallas Cowboys, they're not going to beat everybody 40-0, but Michael Parsons, he ain't going nowhere as long as he stays healthy. That dude's going to be a terror on the defensive side of the football. So that's defensive MVP of the league type play that we're seeing. So I think that, you can kind of bank on that defense, carrying that team until Dak Prescott, and they get this bad boy figured out because, you got to think that, hey, if you trade for a former first-round pick and Trey Lance, you got to think that.
Stop it, Jarvis. Stop.
I'm just saying, Kyle. I
like that. I love that.
But you don't just trade for him for no reason, right? You just trade for a guy like Trey Lance for no reason. It's just hey, we throw you a little 4th-round pick. Let's go see what's going on. Nah, Jared Jones is always up to something, man. You gotta think he's, he still got a little bit of sense left in him, does he?
I think Dallas has a really interesting stretch of games because we talked about they play the Jets defense this week, and then they're at Arizona. But then the next 3 games for them, they're home against New England, They're at San Francisco, who has given them fits in the postseason the last couple years. And that's Sunday Night Football. And then they're at Los Angeles Chargers before their bye. So I would say by the middle of October, that's a team, Dallas, that I'm going to have a lot more confidence in. You are who we thought we were, or for better or for worse.
Yeah. And it sounds like we are kind of buying and selling on both sides, right? We're kind of buying and selling a little bit with the Giants, but also buying and selling a little bit with the Cowboys. But here's where we want to sell. Sell me why on these Chicago Bears. We know what we saw in the Bears in week 1. We're heading into week 2. They're a 2.5-point underdog against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Here's Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears. He's going to sell us why the Bears will cover the spread.
The Chicago Bears will cover the spread against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they know what the Buccaneers are going to do to try and stop them. And there's a lot of pressure on this Bears team to bounce back after a very disappointing week 1. We all know that Todd Bowles is going to blitz Justin Fields. We've seen the Buccaneers do it in previous matchups with the Bears, and we saw them do it a bunch in week 1. It's the way to try and get in Justin Fields' head. There's no mystery here. So then they can know what to do to try and counteract that. They can get rid of the ball more quickly. They can try and roll the pocket away from the blitz. They can leave extra players in to pass protect and can help get this offense back on track, knowing what the defense is going to try and do to get after them. On the other side of the ball, they know they want to go deep with Mike Evans. They know Chris Godwin's going to work underneath over the middle, try and use his route running ability to their advantage. It becomes an easier time to try and stop them, force them to beat you with some of their lesser weapons on offense. And the plan is there for the Bears to put together, at the very least, a game plan to cover the spread, if not try and get in the victory column this week. There's certainly a lot of pressure on this team to play better after disappointment across the board last week. It felt like they came out not exactly unprepared, but just not executing at a high level. A lot of self-inflicted wounds, mistakes where they felt like they beat themselves just as much as the Packers beat them. That can be a little bit easier to clean up than just going out there and feel like, we're no good. Well, no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. They can be better than what they showed last week in week 1. And the Buccaneers are certainly an opportunity for this team to try and get their season on track. It doesn't mean they're going to fix everything and look like some kind of offensive juggernaut and big-time playoff contender, but they've got a great opportunity to cover the spread against a Buccaneers team that may be a little overconfident after beating the Vikings in week 1.
Oh, 2.5-point underdogs are the Bears to the Bucks. Do they cover the spread?
Lauren's trying to sell me beachfront property in Wyoming. I'll tell you what, I'm passing big time on the
Bears.
He almost had me believing.
Chicago, very disjointed offensive effort for Chicago in week 1. And then I look at the matchup with Tampa Bay. It's in Tampa Bay. It's going to be 80% humidity and probably 90, 92 degrees outside. So there's the culture shock of playing down there in the Bay Area that already works against you. Never mind how disjointed and how poorly the offense executed. And I think it extended well beyond just Justin Fields. I know quarterback conversations, everybody wants to center the conversation there, but the offensive line execution, some of the skill player performances, the coaching and the scheme, it was just very chaotic performance. And you're worried you had all offseason to prep a game plan for week 1, and that's what it looked like. And then you look over at Tampa on the other side, and I think that yes, I think Lauren's right. They will be a pressure team, and they will come after Chicago. I just don't know how effective, because Tampa Bay's got these athletic linebackers in Devin White and Levante David. They can run. You think about trying to counteract Justin Fields, and where he's most dynamic is getting outside the pocket and as a quarterback run game threat. I like their ability to counteract that. And then Tampa Bay's biggest weakness offensively is their offensive line. And I look at Chicago and the personnel that they have up front. They got 2 rookie defensive tackles who weren't first-round picks. They've got a couple of guys who have been career rotational guys. They signed Yannick Ngakoue at the midnight hour before the season, and he's comfortably their best pass rusher. I just don't think Chicago has the juice up front to really threaten Tampa at home with where Tampa is weakest.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, I don't trust the guys that you named. I don't trust Luke Getsy. I don't trust Matt Eberflus. Like, when you think about, like, it took them 7 games to figure out, like, oh, Justin Fields can run the football. Oh, he's very athletic. Oh, he can get it. He can break off some 40, 50-yard runs, if we scheme it up correctly, right? And I think that just being able to kind of bring in this new regime, and with Ryan Poles at general manager, and hey, talking about, hey, we're gonna win the North, we're gonna take it back and never give it back, and all this blah 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 blah. It's just hard for me to kind of like trust like an offensive coordinator who can look at Justin Fields and try to force feed him a scheme that clearly doesn't work. When you're talking about quick screens, like that is so predictable sometimes when you get into a weekend and week out basis, because like you can put stuff on tape. Kyle, you know this. You put stuff on tape, teams are going to watch film. They're going to understand what formations you coming in, like, and more than likely they're going to diagnose what play you probably going to run, before the ball is even snapped, and then you put your quarterback in a bad situation. On top of that, compounding that by having a porous offensive line, like Darnell Wright, coming out of the tackle coming out of Tennessee. He didn't have that great of a game. So you knew that you needed to protect this dude. You knew whether or not he was going to be a quarterback or not. Like, you can say, hey, we're going to, surround Justin Fields. We're going to protect Justin Fields by bringing in this guy. We know he can play. We're going to bring in Nate Davis. That hasn't worked out, so far.
Horrendous.
Exactly. So it's like, and this was a free agency edition. You actually went out and spent money on this, bringing this guy in, even when the Tennessee Titans coach didn't want this dude on this team, on their team anymore. So it's just a lot of bad decisions being made, a lot of preparation mistakes that are being made. And so for that reason, Lauren, I'm sorry, man. I know that's a squad and everything, but like, I am not buying them covering this 2.5 point spread.
Well, I think a lot of people are maybe buying the Detroit Lions a little bit more after they pulled off the upset of the Super Bowl champion Chiefs in week 1. Now, heading into week 2, they're 4.5 point favorites over the Seahawks. So here's Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks to tell us why the Seahawks won't disappoint and they will cover the spread.
This is Corbin Smith for the Locked On Seahawks podcast. Considering how poorly the Seahawks played in the second half of their season opening loss to the Rams, 12 total yards of offense, couldn't get off the field on defense. They are the big underdogs going into week 2 against the Lions, 5.5 point underdogs in this game. But the Seahawks, even without both of their starting tackles, most likely in this game, still have DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Tyler Lockett on the outside. They still have Ken Walker at running back. And I expect a bounce back week from Geno Smith with a full week to game plan for the injuries on the offensive line. I like Seattle's chances to be able to move the football well, particularly on the ground, to stay in this football game. And defensively, a lot of the mistakes they had last week were based on communication. They've had the entire week to try to clean up those areas. I think the addition of Devin Witherspoon making his NFL debut is going to help the secondary as well, keeping this game within striking distance, potentially even giving the Seahawks a chance to steal the road win to move to 1-1 in the season.
All right, guys. So the Lions, like I said, they did something that not a lot of us really saw coming, although we do know that KC wasn't quite KC without Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. But ultimately speaking, the Detroit Lions are 4.5 point favorites over the Seahawks. Seahawks won't disappoint, and they'll cover the spread. True or false? That was such a pregnant pause. Oh my goodness. I can't.
like this is back to back. So first Lauren tried to sell me, a magic pair of beans at the end of the rainbow. Right. Now, Corbin is trying to do the same thing. Nah, man. This is something that, like Geno Smith last year. Like that was probably one of the better stories of the season, the 2022 NFL season, right? But I think like a lot of times, yeah, can he play pretty solid? Yeah, I think Geno Smith can play some football, but is he going to play to that same level that he did last year? Nah, I don't think so. I think that was an aberration. Like those things happen in NFL, because I think the stars aligned in his way. And I think that, when you going up against, a team like this, it's just real. You have to be really careful when you're talking about, hey, this we're going to try to do the same thing we did last year. We're going to try to make sure we, get the ball to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf and the likes of those guys, and Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. Like, oh yeah, we're going to sling it all around the yard. Oh, like the Seahawks, they have a foundation. Like they were a really good football team when the foundation of their team was running the football. And when they tried to go away from that, Russell Wilson got exposed a little bit. And I think that with Geno Smith, you need to make sure that you continue to run the football, establish the run, and get back to the basics. And I think that you can potentially may do it, but I don't think they cover this week at all.
JD's talking my language here, getting back to running the football for Seattle. And the more I sit here and think about this, I think I will take Corbin up on this one. I think I'll take this one. And we said week one, the highs are never as high and the lows are never as low, right?
Fair.
You have pretty fair expectations for the Seattle Seahawks. And yes, you're going to miss having Abe Lucas, who went on IR, and Charles Cross doesn't sound like he's going to be able to go. Yes. But I look across at the other side in Detroit and what they have, and you can throw extra attention at one guy in the front. And it's Aiden Hutchinson's the one you're worried about. Now, beyond that, if you pound the rock and you've got all these running backs that you've invested into, you have all these big bodies up front, I think you can get hat on hat with Ali McNeil. I think you can get hat on hat with John Kaminsky, who is a good player, but he's not really a big-time needle mover. I think you can get hat on hat with Benito Jones. And I think you can lean on those guys inside and play physical. And then you look at what they have throughout the rest of the defense, and it's young players, rookie like Brian Branch, who had the pick 6 in the win over the Chiefs. Jack Campbell was all over the place, but is still a rookie draft pick that's playing this year. And I just don't know. Detroit still feels like they're another year away of investments from really having like a complete roster. I can see if Seattle has success gaining plus ground in the vertical run game on the line of scrimmage, I think they can grind this out and make this a really compelling game. So I'll jump in with Corbin on this one. I'll buy.
If all Ben Johnson has to do, Kyle, get Jahmyr Gibbs the ball. Give him the rock.
You're not wrong. But they didn't do it last week.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, y'all drafted this dude in the first round for a reason. Give him the ball. So, yeah, I think that, those I can see those things happening. But, like, I think Ben Johnson probably looked at the tape like, maybe I should get this dude the ball. Because every time he touched it, you understand why they drafted him in the first round.
Yeah. He was much more electric than Montgomery was. There's no question.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And we had a chance to see him up front here in Atlanta with him playing for Georgia Tech and, of course, going on to play for Alabama. Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, something special indeed. Now, we've been talking about, sort of highs, lows, and also kind of contenders, pretenders. And I feel like the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of both fall in that space because Cleveland, I don't think, was as amazing as they looked against the Bengals, but Steelers didn't look as deplorable. I don't think there's as deplorable as they looked against the 49ers, or at least the Steelers fan certainly hopes they are not. Anywho, Monday Night Football will tell us the true tale because it features the Browns heading to Pittsburgh to take on their division rivals. And so Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers is going to join us right now to sell us on why the Steelers will cover the 2.5-point spread.
I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast, and I'm here to tell you why the Steelers can cover the 2.5-point spread that is given to the Cleveland Browns right now. This is the first time the Browns have been favored in Pittsburgh in my lifetime. It's been that long. The Steelers haven't lost to the Browns in a regular season game at home since 1992. The Browns haven't been 2-0 since 1993. And the Steelers haven't lost a Monday Night Football game in 20 years. There's a lot of things to go against them intangible-wise. But on the field, there's also some reasons. The Steelers' run defense played poorly against the Niners due to the adjustments they had to make in the middle of the game. Cam Hayward got hurt. Larry Ogunjobi came into the game hurt. But one thing that they felt very confident about was the emergence of DeMarvin Leal and Keanu Benton. Leal was a third-round pick in the 2022 draft, Benton a rookie from the 2023 draft, but both were able to change the line of scrimmage against the Niners, the offensive line, a little bit too late in the game for it to make a difference as the Niners built a very early lead. But it helped the Steelers establish a better tone against the run later in the game after it was kind of out of hand. The question will be, can they do that against the Browns and Nick Chubb? The other factor here, of course, is TJ Watt. He opened the season with 3 sacks against the San Francisco 49ers, and now he's facing a Browns team that gave up 7 sacks to the Steelers last year in the regular season finale. And so now he faces a rookie 4th-round pick, DeJuan Jones, who will be making his first start, which gives him an opportunity to yet again be a huge playmaker. Those differences on defense will be in play, but you also have to consider, will the Steelers offense look as poorly as they did against the Niners? The Bengals looked terrible against the Browns last week. The Browns defense deserves a lot of credit, and Mike Tomlin gave them a lot of credit this week. But You look at the Steelers offense, the improvements that they've made, there's a lot of chances that they'll be able to strike some better tones this week. As last week, most of their mistakes were on their own end. Kenny Pickett acknowledges as much, and they're looking forward to setting a new tone this week. I think the Steelers offense, if they're able to hit on just a few points, I think the Steelers' ability to change the line of scrimmage and get after the quarterback are the key factors why they'll cover the 2.5 points.
And Chris is right. That is going to be a key factor, being able to get after the quarterback. Indeed. Yeah, they definitely are going to want to do that. However, that has been made more difficult this week because Cam Hayward is on IR. So the question to you guys is this. Thinking about that and already having someone like Deshaun Watson being challenging to bring down in the first place, now you're without Cam. Will the Steelers be able to cover the 2.5 point spread?
I think the Deontay Johnson injury hurts too.
Yes.
That's a big one. Obviously, Pickens has got everybody excited and jazzed up on social media because we're making Randy Moss one-handed catches in practice all training camp and in the preseason games. And he's got phenomenal ball skills. But Johnson as a separator type, I think is a kind of different body type, different skill set for that passing game. And that Cleveland defense, like really, once they address their interior defensive line with Shelby Harris and Dalvin Tomlinson this offseason, they've got a really, really well-rounded defensive depth chart. So I think between losing Cam Hayward, you look at that loss and you say, okay, well, Cleveland lost Jack Conklin. Maybe those two cancel each other out to some degree. The Deontay Johnson loss hurts, but the one that hurts the most is the Browns are wearing these snow, ice, white unis for Monday Night Football. If you haven't seen them, there's a 0% chance that football team's losing wearing those things, man. I'll tell you.
Yeah, talking about so icy, like a fan.
I'm just gonna keep my commentary quiet about that. Yeah, but listen, I'm actually happy, Kyle, because if you want to come in there kind of with your angel, kind of, I don't know, like fairy godmother out, do that because you know what, I want whatever advantage the Steelers can get, like you said, and all honesty, whatever advantage they can get, they absolutely will take it as the Steelers, because Cam Hayward's the obvious kind of the headline, if you will, of the loss. But what Deontay Johnson was able to show, especially last season, just making sure that the Steelers weren't one-dimensional and that Kenny Pickett actually had more than one guy to throw to and one threat, if you will, with the receiving core. That's a big loss for the Steelers.
Yeah, and I here's what I'm waiting on. I want to see can we see scandal Deshaun Watson? Like, I'm waiting for this dude to show up. Like, I really want to see what Deshaun Watson is going to be able to bring to the table, because like the Cleveland Browns defense is nasty.
Yeah.
Like, they have talent up and down that bad boy. And when you think about, those guys, Myles Garrett and, that number 1 overall pick, and like, hey, you're not supposed to pick defensive line like that. No, this dude is a game changer. He has been well worth that pick. And I think that he's the catalyst for that defense. So I'm interested to see on the offensive side of football what Cleveland is going to be able to bring to the table, because, you got guys like Deshaun Watson, who he still needs to prove himself. So I'm sitting here looking at my watch saying, okay, all right, Deshaun, we need to see that guy. And I think Monday Night Football is the perfect place to try to get it going.
He got 230 million fully guaranteed reasons to be the player that he was before. Yes, and if he does not sniff that level of play, and we have not seen it yet, and you understand it was inadverse or unideal weather to play in week 1 with their matchup that they had against the Cincinnati Bengals. But if he doesn't start to sniff that stratosphere, that's going to be a really difficult thing for the Browns to circumvent, to ironically maximize their window, because they have addressed the other questions that they have. And I even think the skill group outside of what they have with Nick Chubb, with Amari Cooper, and then trading for Elijah Moore, he's, I think, leading by a couple of yards. The team in receiving after the first week, very small sample size, but they're apparently very high on him. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a really solid kind of complementary receiver. David Njoku, like they have a lot of pieces in place, and really all you do is you got to just give above average quarterback play. And unfortunately, Jarvis, like you said, we have not seen that yet for Deshaun Watson since he has returned from the suspension.
And you
Well,
know who's going to take the going to have to fall on the sword for that one? Kevin Stefanski. He is. I don't be shocked if we never see Deshaun Watson at least give you that for like at least 9 or 10 games or so to be able to get some wins, and potentially compete for the division. Like Kevin Stefanski is going to be that guy to say, oh, well, it's all his fault, even though the ownership signed off on them trading for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Well, Stefanski and Watson may be able to hide behind Nick Chubbs at least for one more week, because we know what Christian McCaffrey and the 49ers running game was able to do to the Steelers last week. So we'll see if Watson gets to show and prove this week. But we're looking for a better version of Deshaun Watson. Are you looking for a better version of yourself? Well, Jarvis can tell you exactly how to get there with BetterHelp.
Hey, Jarvis Davis here for BetterHelp. Guess what, guys? Sneak, you're talking about being better. Like, I'm all about being better as well. Like, if you've just been dealing with some situation where you're saying, you know what, man, like at night, sometimes I can't, my mind just can continue to just run and run and run and run. And I've dealt with that sometimes myself. And when you get yourself into the place where you're saying, you know what, I need to get some help. BetterHelp is the place where you need to go, guys, because, hey, anywhere else, when you're talking about like, being in the space where you're having these negative thoughts and you're trying to find some peace, BetterHelp can do that just for you guys. And they can I'm telling you, like when you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. We all know how flexible it is nowadays. So make sure you go check them out. All you got to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you don't like the one that you have, all you got to do, you can just switch it up. So here's what I want you to do. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on, and you're going to get 10% off your first month.
Wow, 10%. Never ever hurt anybody. We all appreciate a little something that looks like the free or something that is a good look, just like NFL Kickoff Live is a good look. Welcome back to hour number 2, where you'll get the best football talk every single Friday. We'll take you around the league. We'll talk about every single team, every game, and get any breaking news, which we'll get to in a moment right here at Locked On. So anytime we have that news, we bring it here to you. I bring it to you as your host, Tenitra Batiste, and these guys, Jarvis Davis and Kyle Krause, will bring you all the tea as well, including looking at some of these rooks who definitely impressed in week 1. But which rookies, guys, which rooks did you guys rock with in week 1? And which one do you want to see rock out in week 2?
I'll go with Zay Jones. From Baltimore. Obviously, that's a big schematic change for them in transitioning from Greg Roman to this new offense. And the offense against Houston, did it blow up? No, it wasn't 466 like the Dolphins dropped on the Chargers in week 1. But nevertheless, Zay Jones was kind of the one amidst Rashad Bateman and him looking to live up to his first-round pedigree, and Odell Beckham coming back from his long saga away from the league. It was Zay Jones who I thought was the one who had the most juice out of that wide receiver core. He didn't necessarily lead in yardage. I know that was Puka Nacua, the BYU wide receiver with the Rams, who the Rams kind of sprung on the Seahawks. But I thought Zay Jones, for kind of the guys that we were really eager to see and have first-round pedigrees and are really going to move the needle, that was one for me that kind of jumped out as seeing I only expect his role to get bigger and bigger as the season presses on.
Yeah, I think like we mentioned it earlier. My guy it has to be Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, get the man the football, because when you think about what the Detroit Lions identity is, like they wanted to run the football. Dan Campbell wants to be aggressive. He wants his offensive lineman going forward, being a former tight end in the NFL himself. So when you have a guy as dynamic as Jahmyr Gibbs, you have to give him the rock. You have to feed him the football, because David Montgomery isn't Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, day one, we've seen that. And just going through that process, because you drafted him in the first round. So I think that, I think we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs get a little bit more pushed to get that rock. And to be honest with you, it doesn't even matter if he starts. Like, just get him the football, get him in the game, and watch you get 8-9 yards a touch.
And as far as somebody,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Tenitra.
No, I was just going to kind of chime in with you guys. And I was thinking, do I want to give the obvious one right in my backyard as far as the rook that I thought balled out in week 1? I could go Bijan Robinson, but you know what? I'm going to go up top with a guy that we really kind of want. And we love Bijan down here, by the way, but we really kind of still had our eye on the guy who was in our backyard, Jalen Carter. When I say backyard, meaning Athens, and now he's up top. And what we now call, Kyle, we call Philly North Athens, and right. Jalen Carter is one of the biggest reasons because he had 6 QB pressures, a sack, 32 of 38 snaps out there. He was just balling as a pass rusher. And I mean, he did the kinds of things that you want to see him do. Obviously, he was arguably the most talented player, pass rusher, if not player overall in the draft. And Philly just lucked out and got him. But yeah, he definitely, to me, showed his worth. And one of the guys that maybe I want to see a little bit more out of, we kind of saw it, and I am going to go back to our backyard. We kind of saw it in the first half of the week 1 game, Panthers versus Falcons, where Bryce Young was able to show you why he was that number 1 pick overall in the draft, but then kind of came back down to earth because the Falcons and Ryan Nielsen kind of figured out how to slow him down. However, you can score on the Saints. The Titans didn't necessarily do a lot of it, but that's probably because they just can't score, period. But I see that Carolina will probably reset, and I expect Bryce Young to have a decent bounce back week 2.
Well, Tenitra, you're giving Bijan some love. That's the guy. Can we miss me with Tyler Algier getting 60% of the carries in front of Bijan Robinson? I'm sorry.
Kyle, don't
bring it, Kyle.
Kyle, you touching the cord. Like, I don't know if you see.
Let's take half those carries for Tyler and let's just give them to Bijan, and we can prosper, and we can all be happy and enjoy the greatness of Bijan Robinson. Tyler's a great player, but Tyler's also the incumbent when you chose to draft Bijan Robinson.
Mr.
Give the rock to Bijan, please. I'm begging Atlanta.
Mr. Krabs, let me tell you something, man. Like, I went back. I know you're a big time film guy, so I like to dib and dab myself. So going back and watching the film, man, Bijan Robinson, as great as he is, but you know what the number 1 concern for running backs coming into a league is a rookie. And you know what I'm about to say? It's pass protection. He was awful.
Needs reps.
Needs reps.
Yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? So when Tyler Algier, he was probably one of the better running backs I've seen as a rookie coming in last year, and from a protection standpoint. And I think that we saw as the games went along, we saw like, okay, you understand why they took him, why they drafted him. So I think that you can't erase Tyler Algier. Let's just get that straight. You're not going to erase Tyler Algier, but I get it. But here's the thing. Here's what's going to be good to work out for the Falcons. And I think it's going to work out for them very well. Having those guys in the game at the same time, I feel like that is going to open that offense up tremendously. And you're going to get a really good look at why the Falcons drafted Bijan Robinson. But you can't, don't start that stuff. You can't take my guy Tyler. Like, you can't take him away, man. That dude is a good doggone running back. He's an old school guy. I try to stick to my old school guns from time to time because everybody want to do all the new fancy stuff. But yeah, I really feel like Tyler deserves to be in the game at the same time with Mr. Walk on Water, as I affectionately refer to him as.
And that he is. Bijan is absolutely amazing. But yeah, he's one of those rookies who showed you, well, yes, he may not have been the blocking guru that Jarvis wanted him to be. I have to say with Kyle, he showed the flashes that we wanted to see both in the run game and in the receiving game, and the versatility that not just the Falcons wanted to see, but really the league was amazed and astonished at what he was able to do overall. Now, week 1 saw losses from NFL teams that had high expectations. You look at the Chargers, Chiefs, Giants, and Bills. What does week 2 look like for some of these teams? Can they bounce back? We'll see. Let's go game to game.
If the Chargers want to pick up their first win of the season against the Titans, they need a big bounce back game from their defense. This is Daniel Wade here from Locked On Chargers, and the Chargers allowed 36 points in week 1 that spoiled their own 34-point effort. And it's not going to fly against a much less dynamic Tennessee Titans offense in week 2. Last week, the one thing the defense could probably say, hey, look, we improved a little bit, was their run defense. They only allowed 3.5 yards per carry, which is so much better than the 5.4 they allowed in 2022. But last week, they also weren't going up against Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going to present a totally different kind of animal for this Chargers defense to try to contain, and the tackling last week wasn't great. I don't think that the Chargers were going to put up 34 points again offensively. It's up to the defense this week under defensive head coach Brandon Staley to show that last week was a one-off. But for the full game breakdown, make sure to check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to bounce back against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday afternoon because of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I'm Chris Clark, host of the Locked On Chiefs podcast, and this Chiefs team is primed to head to 1-1 on the season. There are so many things that went wrong against the Detroit Lions. All the drops, that's a big problem. But the thing that sticks out to me the most, and one of the things that I know Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are going to get right going into week 2, is all the spacing in the offense. One of the reasons that Andy Reid is so good offensively at calling and making play calls and getting everybody open at different times is because of the play calling and the design of the plays. When you look at how they played against the Detroit Lions, you had guys that were not in the right spacing, not running the right routes, not running the routes at the right depth. They will get that all taken care of and ready for week 2.
The New York Giants will bounce back in week 2 because, quite honestly, the team isn't that bad as it showed against the Cowboys. Not when you consider that half of Dallas's 40 points were a result of Giants' miscues, right? But seriously, a key for the Giants is going to be that offensive line, which allowed 7 sacks, 9 if you count the 2 that were nullified due to a penalty, and 12 hits against quarterback Daniel Jones. The Cardinals' defense is no slouch, having sacked Washington quarterback Sam Howell 6 times in their week 1 opener. But so as the Giants' offensive line tries to expedite its gelling process, don't be surprised if they do a little bit more max protecting and quicker passes to help keep quarterback Daniel Jones upright as the Giants look to go 1-1 this season.
The Buffalo Bills will bounce back in week 2 because that's what they've proven able to do time and time again. I'm Joe Marino, host of the Locked On Bills podcast. The Buffalo Bills lost a goofy game in week 1 to the New York Jets on the road in Monday Night Football. Josh Allen turned it over 4 times, which opened the door for the Bills to blow a 10-point halftime lead over the New York Jets. But the Bills are a much better football team than they showed in week 1, and a home opener in week 2 against the Las Vegas Raiders is the perfect situation for the Bills to get their season on track. The Bills, they're the far more talented team than the Raiders, but they also have an impressive history of bouncing back after a loss. Since 2020, the Bills are 9-3 coming off of a loss, which is the second highest win percentage of any team in the NFL. They also boast the largest average margin of victory at 10.9 points per game on average coming after a loss. Folks, Sunday's home opener against the Raiders can't come soon enough, and I expect the Bills to bounce back and get this season fully on track.
Well, you know, the NFL is full of elite talent that we'll talk about in just a minute. But first, Jarvis is here to tell you guys all about our partners at Game Time.
Listen up, people. Jarvis Davis for Game Time here. Locked On NFL is the code you need to use to get $20 off. So let me tell you why you need to go to Game Time, because buying tickets to your favorite event should not be stressful. I know you've been tripping about trying to get some tickets and get some money to go to the Jets and to go watch that game because you're tired of going to the Giants game. I know you're trying to flip. I know you're trying to flip. I can see it in your eyes. You're trying to flip to be a Jets fan. Yeah, even though they're dealing with Aaron Rodgers, the loss of Aaron Rodgers. I get it. I understand. I know what y'all talking about. But here's if you want to get those Jets tickets and stop going to Giants games. Game Times is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. So, hey, if you want to go watch Zach Wilson go get down, go to Game Time and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. All you got to do is download Game Time today because last-minute tickets, lowest price, is guaranteed.
Jarvis. You don't actually believe that anybody is going to flip to the Jets. Bless your heart. Meanwhile,
they're in New York. I mean,
I just had to call that out. I'm like, I just had to call it out.
A very exciting defense.
Bless his heart. Bless his little heart. Like, just bless your heart. Anyway, guys, who knows, Kyle? Maybe Jarvis will tell us that his player to watch, because he seems to be on the Jets bandwagon. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't like his job, but he seems to be on the Jets bandwagon. Maybe that's where he'll bring his one player for us to watch this week. But I want to know first from you, KC, who is your one player to watch?
Well, I got to hold it down with the team up here on the wall, and I'm talking Tyreek Hill.
Okay.
215 receiving yards against the Chargers. And he has openly stated throughout the course of the offseason he is on a mission for 2,000 yards this season. And we are off to a good start because we're on pace to hit it in about the third quarter of the 10th game of the season after week 1. And the New England Patriots are hosting Miami. The hurricane, tropical storm, whatever it's going to be up out of the area in Foxborough. It's Sunday Night Football. It's primetime, big-time players make big-time plays in big-time moments with big-time audiences on national television. So I'm thinking Tyreek Hill. And then the news came out yesterday that Jonathan Jones, one of the corners for New England, did not participate in practice. And then he was not spotted at practice on Friday. So I don't know what that means for his injury availability just yet. But Jack Jones is already on injured reserve with a hamstring issue for New England. So you're talking about you might be down your top 2 corners with Miami coming to town and Tyreek hitting 215. I'm going to be keeping my eye on this race for 2K because Tyreek ain't messing around and he might just get it.
You know what? I put my money on him as well. I don't think that's a bad bet at all. Now, Jarvis, who do you have your eye on going into week 2? Are you going to stay in your backyard just like our guy, Kyle?
No, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna travel up to the NY. Not the Giants. I'm not gonna leave y'all alone for now.
Why?
I'm gonna go to the New York Jets and Zach Wilson. Like this dude has to be thinking in his car right now, just riding around. Probably still in practice at the moment. But once he gets in the car, I am totally sure that he is thinking about his future right now, because how he plays in these next couple of games is going to determine whether or not we hear Joe Douglas start picking up that phone and saying, hey, big head, to Phillip Rivers, how you doing? You want to have a conversation? Hey, you want to take a leave of absence? How you feeling? You want an ice bath? We can fly out a private jet to New York, Matt, hey, Matt, you want to take a break from this lame announcer making 28-3 jokes and come out here and try to play some football? Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen if Zach Wilson doesn't play well this week, because they have to give him an opportunity because, hey, he's there. He's on the roster. But I really feel like I'm going to keep my eye on him because he's the guy that I feel like has a lot of pressure, even though we're only in the second week of the season.
Well, the guy that I'm going to watch, because somebody should have some love and respect and appreciation for B. Olsen and the Boss B. So I am going to say my guy to watch is Saquon Barkley. Now, he didn't do bad as far as his average. He did average about 4.3 yards per carry last week, but it was 12 carries, 51 yards. That's not really a Saquon Barkley-like game, right? So I'm going to be looking for him to have a bounce back. Like you said, Jarvis, this is an opportunity where he was one of those guys going back and forth saying the running back room got something to say. Okay, well, running back room say something. And Saquon, you should be the voice that we hear the loudest if the Giants have an opportunity to bounce back from laying an egg last week. That's just kind of how that goes if you want to be one of those guys. Now, The Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow started the season shockingly flat. Not a shock for me, and I was happy about it. The Baltimore Ravens got a win in week 1. Wasn't happy about that, but they did not come out of that game healthy, which that is a bit disappointing. So you got to wonder, how does this one play out? Well, Kevin Oestreicher from Locked On Ravens joins James Rapian and Jack Liskow from Locked On Bengals, and they're going to break down how they see this one playing out.
Seen Joe Burrow throughout his career. His first game against Baltimore got pummeled, and then he figured it out, solved the puzzle, and that second game felt different, and he was able to do that. Well, now it's a new defensive coordinator, and you had 3 opportunities last year. Didn't really get to get it done that way. Obviously, they won the 2 that mattered the most, but can he solve that? Excuse me. I think that's a huge question. But you mentioned offensive line play. And that's the key here. Outside of Burrow solving the riddle, it's, can you protect him? Because if you're going to be able to protect Joe Burrow and he's going up against the banged up secondary, well, good luck. That's much different than Denzel Ward and those corners he faced last week in Cleveland with Myles Garrett bearing down on you and Zadarius Smith. And so it could feel much, much different. I agree with you, Kevin. Getting off to a quick start against a team in the Bengals that I think the pressure is on them this week. That's key for the Ravens. Flipping it, though, the Bengals, can they get something going on offense early just to build a little confidence? Not that they're not confident, but just going down and starting the game with points and not having to settle for a 3 and out or having to punt on your first drive. I think that would go a long way, especially considering the possessions that they get or don't get against the Ravens. That's something Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow talked about. You don't get many possessions against the Ravens. They like to run the ball, run the clock. And so if you're limited possessions-wise, you got to make the most of them when you have the ball.
And the Ravens using tons more 11 personnel this year, like 30% more than they did last year. So like the offensive transformation for the Ravens, very interested to see how that's different this week. But if you're the Bengals in this game, you look at where the Ravens are hurt, and you have to take advantage of that. No Ronnie Stanley, no Tyler Linderbaum, very likely no Marlon Humphrey, no Marcus Williams. There's some good players still playing on these teams, on the Ravens, obviously, with those guys out. I have a lot of respect for Roquan Smith, for Jadeveon Clowney. I've talked up Justin Madubuike. I've talked up Travis Jones in the past. But those guys are going to have to play really well for the Ravens to overcome what they're missing in the back end of their secondary and what they're missing on the offensive line. Lamar Jackson and those receivers and Mark Andrews are going to have to play really well to overcome the pieces that I think they're missing on the offensive line and in the running game. So I think that the Bengals need to take advantage of those opportunities where they have them. And a big piece is look like a competent offensive line. You talked about confidence, James, and building confidence. If there's one unit that needs to do that this week against, again, I respect the players on the Ravens defensive line. I just don't think they're as good as what the Browns offer there. This is a week that the Bengals need to look better in the offensive line to start going in the right direction. With all that said, Kevin, you're talking about a tight game here. How do you think this plays out in Cincinnati? What's your score prediction? I think you got a desperate Bengals team here now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think going down 0-2 would be a disaster for the Bengals. It's a classic get right spot. I had the Ravens winning this game before the season started, but you can't ignore the injuries that Baltimore has. It'd be great if the Ravens won it. I think they can, but I'm going to give this one to the Bengals after everything that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. Maybe things don't go right for Cincinnati, but I'm going to say the final score, and I always overshoot it, but these are two talented offenses. I'm going to say 31-27 Bengals, but even that to me feels high.
That's a lot of points.
Yeah, it's a lot of points, and the McDonald riddle would be solved if that's the case. By the way, I'm a fan of points and big plays, so sign me up for your result, Kevin. I'm taking the Bengals as well. I asked Joe Burrow multiple times on Wednesday kind of what it would mean in different ways, and he said how important it was to get to 1-1 versus 0-2 like they were last year. I think they find a way at home to get it done. The Bengals 27, Ravens 20.
And guys, I'm going to go back to something that both Jake and Kevin alluded to in terms of how this game plays out. You've got a team in the Bengals looking to bounce back, but then you've got a team in the Ravens banged up. Kyle, how do you think, especially with some of the news that we just received about the Bengals, how do you think this game is going to play out with some of the things that our analysts just mentioned?
Yeah, I think it has the potential to be a really compelling game.
Yeah.
But then you look at the injury report and Marcus Williams with the pec.
Yeah.
And Ronnie Stanley's out.
Mm-hmm.
And Tyler Linderbaum, their stud first-round pick from last year, is out.
Yeah.
And Marlon Humphrey's out again. And it's just, it feels like Baltimore always has this stretch on an annual basis. And for it to come this early is just, it's brutal for them. I think it takes a lot of the wind out of the sails of Baltimore's chances to win the football game going to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati facing down the prospect of going 0-2 to start the season. And that's like 12% of teams historically that start 0-2 bounce back and make the playoffs. So 9 out of 10 teams not making it is the prospect of the odds for Cincinnati that you're looking at. And you can see how they bounced back last year, and they were a team that was a part of that 12% last year. Cincinnati was. But Cleveland is better. Cincinnati is who they are. They've had some losses in the secondary and free agency at the safety position with Von Bell and Jesse Bates leaving.
Yeah.
And they have a good matchup against Baltimore this week. I would say Baltimore is probably better if they're healthy. Pittsburgh, another year older, more mature. They reinvest in the offensive line. They have their own respective injuries. Every team's going to have it. And at the end of the day, the win-loss record's not going to care. It's a highly competitive division. So you leverage 0-2, 12% with a divisional game against a team that's banged up. And it makes this such a pivotal moment for Cincinnati. And they're that team that's kind of been there with the deep playoff runs lately. So I think that'll really help them too. I think they get this done. And I certainly think that the injuries play their part here for Baltimore.
Yeah, and to add to that, I don't see Joe Burrow having the type of game that he did last week. Like we talked about how operating in extremes, right? That was an extreme. Like nobody saw what happened to that Cincinnati Bengals offense. No one saw that coming. So I feel like it's going to level off somewhere like a lot more than what they did last week. It's offensively. So and to be honest with you, only way I see this even being a game is the fact that Lamar Jackson has an MVP type season that I predicted that he would have this year. So it's hard when you have your guys like you mentioned, Tyler Linderbaum and Stanley. Those guys, those are starters for you up front, and those guys are pretty doggone good football players. So when you lose those guys like that, they just been cannibalized with all of these injuries so early on. And this is something that we're pretty much used to Baltimore seeing. I don't know what somebody ain't living right up in Baltimore for them to be hit with injuries like that. So we might have to look at do a little deep dive into that for Mikal, because it's very interesting to see them dealing with these injuries like this early on.
Yeah. And again, I think that it's one of those kind of interesting situations, because when you look at that game on the schedule, you think that's going to be a seriously competitive game even early on in the season, because these are two teams that are highly competitive. And, like you said, Kyle, with the Bengals, you've definitely seen them make deep runs of late. And Jarvis, like you said, with the Ravens, they just always have a squad that's healthy, and Coach Harbaugh always has those guys ready. But I do agree as well that Joe Cool is not going to let this happen 2 weeks in a row. He's got way too many weapons, and there's a decent secondary for the Ravens, but I definitely think that the Bengals are going to be able to get around that. I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue, especially with, like you all said, so many other issues that they're dealing with on the injury front with the Ravens. But we will see. And we don't think that either of these teams are at the bottom of the NFL, but there are some teams that are, and we're going to talk about those teams in a little bit. But first, let's talk Prize Picks.
Jarvis Davis here for Prize Picks. It is the most fun thing you need to check out, because guess what? Because I've been winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. It's super easy. You got to worry about anybody getting all your information or anything like that. And guess what? Prize Picks even have a cool little thing called Apple Pay. I know all you young people have heard of that. Yes, you can get your money as soon as that bet clears. You drop them right there in your little Apple Pay, and then you can go to the grocery store and buy all your little groceries and everything. All y'all little Apple folks. Yeah, I'm talking to y'all. Yeah, so go to prizepicks.com/locked-on-NFL, and you can take advantage of all the offers they have right there. So here's what it is. All right, you can use the code LOCKEDONNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And plus, they also offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. We going up. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So there's another reason to go to prizepick.com/LockedOnNFL. Prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy.
Oh, Jarvis, you're talking about fantasy and Apple Pay and Jarvis all in like the same area. Oh my goodness. Bless his Android heart. Anyway.
Yes, Android. Yes.
Bless his Android heart, because he can't use his Apple Pay if he wants to for Prize Picks, but you guys certainly can use your Apple Pay for Prize Picks. Anywho, last week, of course, you guys know that I caught up with my guy, Ross Jackson. He picked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to be the front runner for the first overall pick in the NFL draft. Not really a front runner, right? Has that changed after week 1? Well, we're about to find out, because we are going to go around the NFL with the Jackson 5. Well, Ross, it was a wacky week 1, even in the NFC South, because only one team took an L. That, of course, was the Carolina Panthers. So which team might take an L in week number 2 from the NFC South?
You sure you want to ask me this question, Tanisha? Because you know the answer. You know I'm coming with the Atlanta Falcons on this one. You know it's the Atlanta Falcons. I do think genuinely out of the 3 teams that went unbeaten, if you will, for the first game of the season, that the Falcons do have the biggest test, right? The Green Bay Packers coming off of that big win against a big time rival in the Chicago Bears. They're going to have a lot more of an outfitted attack than what the Carolina Panthers were able to bring in their game against the Atlanta Falcons. So I do think that Green Bay is the biggest test of the teams that the New Orleans Saints, who will be going up against the Carolina Panthers, as well as, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who will be going up against those very Chicago Bears that the Green Bay Packers blew out last week. I just think Atlanta's got the biggest test. So if I had to pick one of the 3 to be most likely, it would please me to say it's going to be the Atlanta Falcons.
And you know what? That you're absolutely right in the test part, because listen, the Packers definitely showed up and showed out against the Bears in week 1. Interestingly enough, we'll see what kind of happens. Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, like those are some kind of variables that we don't know about. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what it looks like on Sunday. But yeah, that's the test coming out of the NFC South. Absolutely. Now, an unfortunate situation, 4 snaps into his debut game with the Jets, Aaron Rodgers goes down. And man, it felt like for some that the Jets season went down in flames. But are the Jets making the right decision in what they're going to do with the rest of the season as far as moving forward with Zach Wilson as QB1?
The Jets are 100% making the right decision moving forward with Zach Wilson. I think this is exactly what they should be doing. Look, Zach Wilson, you go and grab the guy that knows the system, that has already been in the system, that can run the system, and just spent an entire offseason learning from Aaron Rodgers. That has to move the needle some. And don't be too concerned if you're a Jets fan and you thought, hey, Zach Wilson coming in, he didn't perform incredibly well against the Buffalo Bills. It's a very, very different situation coming in as an emergency backup quarterback versus being able to actually prepare your game plan as the starting quarterback all week. Some folks have said, go out there, try to trade for a veteran, things like that. No, don't worry about all that. Zach Wilson, reinvest in the young guy that you've invested in before and see what you can get done with him. I think this is 100% the right decision for you.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And who knows, Zach Wilson may surprise us and show that after being under the tutelage of Aaron Rodgers across this offseason and during training camp, that maybe some of his skills, so to speak, and some of his mindset, if you will, and just the way that he goes after the game, maybe that's rubbed off on Zach Wilson. Another guy that surprised us, although we knew Baker Mayfield was going to start for the Bucs, but let's just be honest, we didn't expect necessarily that they were going to come out with a win with Baker in week 1, but they did. So did that at all change your mind about which team, like maybe the Bucs, will have the first pick in the 2024 NFL draft?
I still think it's ultimately going to be the Bucs. I don't trust Baker Mayfield that much of a fan as you want to be of the guy in terms of all of the things that he's experienced throughout his NFL career. But I still think it can be the Bucs. But I do think that the opponent that they play this week, the Chicago Bears, have entered that chat with a lot of fervor. That offense just was not together. They're not letting Justin Fields play football. They're forcing him to throw, a ton of screens in this game, all those things.
Yeah.
So I think that this game right here between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chicago Bears could potentially even be the tiebreaker for the number one overall pick for the 2024 NFL draft by the time it's all said and done at the end of the season.
Yeah, you may be looking into a crystal ball, and I think you're looking into the crystal ball the right way. Now, there were, like we said, some quirky things that happened in week one, including things like the shocker after Monday night where the Bills somehow crapped the bed and ended up giving the Jets that game in overtime, although Xavier Gibson would say otherwise because he basically took it from them. But overreactions, always. What week one overreaction have you heard? And wait, you're actually buying it.
Yeah, there's one out there, and it is that the Baltimore Ravens should do everything that they can to get Jonathan Taylor in their backfield behind Lamar Jackson. Another injury to J.K. Dobbins, another situation here to where you're trying to be this, offense that is kind of taking into a new mold, but you want to be able to have that run game. Go and get you a Jonathan Taylor. Go and get you somebody that can be that backfield workhorse behind Lamar Jackson and that Baltimore Ravens offense. I am 100% buying that narrative.
And the overreaction from week one that you're selling.
Oh, that's easy for me. These Dallas Cowboys. Come on. Open it up in a game where you have a fantastic performance. I get it. You goose egg the New York Giants, so on and so forth. But the New York Giants shot themselves in the foot quite a bit in the process. I'm all about the Dallas Cowboys being a competitor within the NFC East. I'll even buy into them being a competitor in the NFC. But are they going to be Super Bowl champions all of a sudden? Zero chance for me that is what that team ends up being at the end of this year.
Yeah, you look at a team like the Eagles, even though they're going to be down some players going into week two, I still say get out of your division first, and then we'll have some conversation. It is the Jackson 5. Thanks so much, Ross. We'll be back next week. Strong words for our guy, Ross Jackson. What say you guys?
Wow. I think I'm with him. Only thing I disagree with him as far as with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the fact that it is not hard at all for me not to root for Baker Mayfield. When you talk about arrogant, pompous, those are the first thing to kind of come to mind when he came to the NFL, but he got humble really quickly. So I really feel like, Tampa Bay is kind of wasting that defense because, I'm so envious of it, right? Like, they have excellent defense. I love the guys that, got Shaq Barrett and Vita Vale and Devin White and Levante David.
They got guys.
They got guys that can just get after it. So I really feel like, from a quarterback standpoint, I feel like they should have gone a little bit more, maybe pushed a little bit more. And they tried to sell us on this whole Kyle Trask versus Baker Mayfield quarterback competition. Like, if he's competing with Kyle Trask for a starting spot, like, Baker Mayfield needs to lead the league now. So I think that was more so of a facade, to Kyle Trask because they drafted him, I guess. But I think that Baker Mayfield is somebody it's interesting how his story has played out because there were a lot of people on that bandwagon when he first came into the league.
I'm not a big math guy, but I know usually to get the number one overall pick in the draft, you probably have a cap at 3 wins. So Tampa's got one. They're playing Chicago, who looked significantly worse than they did at home this week. You still have games against Houston. You have 2 games against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, who did not look particularly good. They have a game against the Tennessee Titans at home, the Indianapolis Colts, another rookie quarterback. I'm just looking at the schedule and the way that week one, if week 2 plays out the same way, the way that we feel about that Tampa Bay Chicago game, then I think, Ross, the process was good. But if the first 2 weeks play out the way that they do, I do think Tampa will find their way into another couple of wins and probably end up being out of that spot. If you told me last week they lost to Minnesota and Chicago looked good, I'd be in. But Tampa won in week 1 and Chicago looked horrible, and we expect Tampa to win this weekend. So that for me was my biggest takeaway with Ross and that discussion with Tampa Bay was just I think the schedule is going to end up playing out in a way now that they're potentially in a position to have 2 wins in the first 2 weeks to not settle into that first pick.
Yeah. And, Kyle, we're going to stay right there since we're talking about bottom dwellers. Hey, at the end of the day, somebody's got to bring up the rear. So, guys, let's talk a little bit more about who you all think are those bottom 5 teams, at least through the first full week of the season. Who are these bottom teams who are cellar dwellers across the NFL?
I think it was very savvy of you to shout out Saquon Barkley as a bounce back candidate going against the Arizona Cardinals, because if you can't bounce back against the Cardinals, I got bad news for you. You might not bounce back. So
yes,
Arizona's
agreed.
that team. And there appears to be a very conscious awareness of where they are as a team, what their talent allocation look like, trading for Josh Dobbs 2 weeks before the season starts, and then him getting the start in week 1 over Clayton Tune, who they drafted and had been there all mini camp, all OTAs, all training camp. Now we're still going to start Dobbs. They lost in week 1, and they barely lost in week 1 to Washington. As far as over on Locked On NFL Scouting, Joe Marino and I, we watched all 32 teams in the summer and graded the players on all the teams. Those 2 teams were the worst ranked rosters that we had in the NFL. It was Washington and Arizona. They just happened to play each other in week 1. But you ask me, worst teams in the NFL, that's where I start.
I'm with you. That was my team as well. Like the Arizona Cardinals are just awful. I wouldn't even be surprised if they're glad that Kyler Murray started the season on IR, and because this is going to be something to keep an eye on, because we know what the whole contract situation, and we know what that was about. But that was a previous regime. You got a new head coach in there, so and when you have those things going on, we've seen this movie before in Arizona. They drafted Josh Rosen, and then that's how Kyler Murray came in, and somehow he trusted them to not do the same thing to him. That's almost like a relationship. Like, hey, you stole that dude's girlfriend, but you can't be surprised if somebody else comes steals your girlfriend too. So I think Kyler Murray might be that girlfriend walking out that door, because we all know who's going to be the number 1 overall pick next year, and I think that and it's up to him as to whether or not he comes out or not. If Arizona ends up with that number 1 pick, I will be very interested to see how this Arizona Cardinals story play out, because there are a lot of little underlying stories that just makes for just good NFL soap opera off-season type stuff.
Now, you guys are talking a little bit about some of the teams who took an L in that first week, and some of them, yes, I think we all agree that the Cardinals are probably that cellar dweller, and we're not surprised that they took an L in the first week, and wouldn't be surprised if they take at least 14 more throughout the season, or maybe 13 more throughout the season. But let's talk about some other teams who lost in that first week, and whether or not you feel like they're maybe bottom 5 as well, as opposed to maybe that was just an aberration in that first week. And so when I look at those teams, I might look at the Texans, so to speak. Bears, we kind of talked about a little bit, but let's talk back about them. Also, I don't think we've talked much about the Colts or Chargers, and whether or not you guys kind of see them at the bottom of the pile.
Texans are tough because they got banged up big time, and now Laramie Tunsil's not practicing as of yesterday, and they already had their other starting tackle, Titus Howard, on IR, and Juice Scruggs, their day 2 centers, not playing right now. So that they've had to go out and acquire a bunch of additional offensive linemen. They tried really hard to get a good group in front of CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
But the injuries have taken their toll. And then even on the defensive side of the ball for D'Amico Ryans, their 2-star safeties in Jalen Petrie and is it Jimmy Ward, the other one? They're both banged up right now too. So that's a team. I think there's a lot of new there. And if the injuries do end up taking their toll, I could see them being as a team that finishes in that bottom 5 stratosphere. But I'm a little bit more optimistic for Houston, because this offseason felt like they had a plan and a direction. And the last 2 years with one and done head coaches, they're signing a bunch of 1-year contract players that were fringe NFL roster players. And it was like, okay, like you're year 3 of this and you feel like an expansion team. What's going on here? They're not doing that now. It's just there's a lot of youth and a lot of turnover that might end up taking its toll on them in the standings when it's all said and done.
I'm gonna have to go with the Colts because I mean I know they flashed a little bit against the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 1 and it kind of made the game kind of interesting. But when you look at that roster up and down, like Anthony Richardson is going to struggle this year, and I think that they're gonna have to practice some patience with him because I wasn't as big a fan as as a lot of people were with him coming out. As far as being that athletic guy, the athleticism is there. But it is so hard to correct accuracy. Like that is the biggest thing now. And a lot of people want to point to Josh Allen, but I think that's more so of an aberration, more so than an actual practice or something you can do on a consistent basis. And I just don't think you can teach accuracy like that. So I think, the Colts are going to be right around in that bottom 5 area that we thought they were coming into this season and I think that Shane Steichen is going to have to really take this season to kind of basically just teach and be that mentor for a guy like Anthony Richardson going forward.
Yeah, and that's a tough way to go because it kind of is reminiscent of Peyton Manning's rookie season where, hey, he had the goods, but 3-13 because, well, what's behind him. So talk a little bit more about that, but looking to be a better version of yourself. That's what we want to talk about now because Jarvis is going to tell you guys a little bit about how to be better and how you can do that with BetterHelp.
Guys, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy I'm sorry, goodness gracious alive. Let me start over. Give therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. Guys, if you've been sitting at night worrying about things and struggling with different thoughts or something like that, you're trying to slow those down, you're trying to have a peace of mind, all you have to do is just go to BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try because they're going to be able to help you out, and it's entirely online. You don't have to worry about going into an office or being insecure about walking into an office and telling people your problems. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. So all you have to do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, somebody that can understand who you are. You can just they're going to match you up with somebody that's going to be able to help you and get you where you need to be and get rid of some of those, racing questions that may be going on in your mind when you're trying to get some sleep and get rest. And also, if you don't like that therapist, they'll help you switch at no additional charge. So here's what I want you to do. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon, and you're going to get 10% off your first month.
Again, pretty good deal to get 10% off to be a better version of you. I mean, who wouldn't want to be that? And also, there are some teams that are looking in week 2 to be better versions of themselves. Now, the Chargers and the Titans, probably 2 of those teams, because of course they came out of week 1 with a loss, but both came out with some positive performances, still some things that are positive to take away into week 2. So what gives this week as both look to get in the win column? Well, Lee Sterling and your boy Q break down this level 2 lock from Locked On Bets.
Open it, open it, open it. Lee has the key to the lock of the day.
How about the LA Chargers and the Tennessee Titans? These two teams have one thing in common. Neither one of them have a win yet on the season, both 0-1. FanDuel.com line on this one. Chargers -3 versus Titans. Break this one down for us, Lee.
Yeah, 2 tough losses. I mean, Tennessee had a chance. If they didn't have that blown whistle, I mean, the Carr, what they ruled an incompletion right away should have been a fumble. They win that game, even with Ryan Tannehill throwing 3 interceptions. So Chargers in maybe the most exciting game of the weekend lose to a Miami team that I had heard was preparing for 3 or 4 weeks in advance for that game. But let's look at where both teams are. LA we know, pass the football, but they were also incredible running the football against the Dolphins. 234 rushing yards at a 5.9 yards per carry clip. Ryan Tannehill awful. I mean, his decision making, that offensive line, pass blocking, horrendous. DeAndre Hopkins looked better than expected. Derrick Henry looks good, but all you got to do is key on two guys. Forget about the tight ends, the other receivers here. I just think that Justin Herbert has too many weapons here. I think this Chargers defense, which is healthy, is going to come to play here. I'm going with a level 2 lock. LA Chargers here. Lay the points, 31-20 over Tennessee.
Yeah, they got into a hell of a game against Miami, and Miami, man, they look fantastic, right? That's a whole nother conversation. But I do think the Chargers find a way to get back into the win column for the first time in 2023. They are a really good team. You can see that so far, but they got to get the dub, right? They got to get it at the end. They got to finish it off, and I think they start that thing up to this upcoming week against the Tennessee Titans. What level lock did you give that one?
Level 2 lock.
Boom. Level 2 lock. Chargers -3 versus Tennessee Titans.
Level 2.
Yes,
Hey,
yes. So that's interesting because we talked about those
a little more
levels last
confident than he
week.
was.
Yeah, right. We talked about the levels last week and we were kind of trying to figure it out. And now we kind of got an idea where these guys go with locks 1, 2, and 3. 1 being the not so good lock, 3, of course, being the best. But what do you guys think about the lock?
I'm with it. I was just gonna say I agree with it, because here's the thing: like the cat's out of the bag with Ryan Tannehill. Some people may say that it was out before, but when Arthur Smith was there, it was kind of like he was like a here we go, Kyle, a product of the scheme and the system, or it's just he has one of the greatest running backs we've ever seen in the last decade in Derrick Henry. Yeah, I think that matters. So. I think you've seen the decline of Ryan Tannehill and what he's able to do at the quarterback spot, and who's to say we might see Malik Willis or Will Levis at some point during this season. And that's another team that I feel like can possibly potentially be at the bottom 5 of NFL. So I think that the Chargers easily cover this -3 spread that we're talking about. So yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I don't know. I'm surprised it's not a higher lock. Why isn't it a level 55 lock? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, come on, man. I need you to have a little more confidence.
The only thing I disagree with is it was disrespectful how this was not a level 3 lock. This was a slam dunk. As far as I'm concerned.
I like to exaggerate, Kyle. My bad.
And look, I watched the tape because obviously I do all the work for Locked On Dolphins. So I was very much in the weeds, and Los Angeles presents so many problems for teams defensively because they have Justin Herbert and they have the wide receiver duo of Keenan Allen, who's healthy after being banged up for stretches of last year, and Mike Williams, and they have an athletic tight end, and Austin Eckler hadn't practiced for the last couple of days after having an ankle injury against Miami. But the run game, even if it's Joshua Kelly, they've got one of the more complete offensive lines in football with the return of Rashawn Slater, who missed almost the entire year last year. They have a first-round pick at guard at Zion Johnson. They got a top 5 center in Corey Linsley. They re-signed Trey Pipkins to be the other offensive tackle, who was a small school developmental guy who got underdrafted in the draft because he was a small school guy. And then Jamari Salyer, another Athens guy.
Yes.
Holding it down at right tackle, and he held it down at left tackle. He held it down at left tackle once Slater went out for the year last year. Like
he's a dancing bear, Kyle. He's a dancing bear.
The dancing bear is the perfect analogy. So that they got a good offensive line. It's physical. It's athletic. They got pass catchers. They've got a guy with a bazooka for an arm in Justin Herbert, who is continuing to get better at operating in Kellen Moore's system. Everybody says, where's all the explosive plays? Well, you played Vic Fangio. That's the entire thing. They're going to play 4 guys deep, and they're going to dare you to dink and dunk and run the ball. And the Chargers ran the ball. But they had the success that they did because they're such a diverse offense. So I think they are really going to give the Titans fits. And DeAndre Hopkins is dealing with an ankle. He might not play in this game either. The house. Send the house. Level 10 lock on Chargers to cover -3.
Exactly. And Austin Eckler literally went off last week. The Chargers nearly pulled that off against the Dolphins, right? Where he had 16 carries, 117 yards, and a touchdown. So, and the Titans couldn't score. The Titans couldn't find the end zone. So I think, that's one of those where we're literally kind of scratching our heads like, isn't this kind of the obvious thing, if you will? Now, there were a lot of frustrated fantasy owners last week as so many top tier guys really didn't live up to their draft position. So, hey, you know what it is. It's time to give up on them, or it's time to decide that maybe not. You want to just hunker down. We'll figure it out, because Locked On Fantasy Football host Michelle Majuk gives us a look at players who she feels should bounce back this week.
There was a lot of disappointment in week 1 for fantasy football, but I'm going to give you 3 guys I think will bounce back in a big way this week. First up is Steelers running back Najee Harris. I know, gross, but the Steelers ran 10 times in the entire game in week 1 against the 49ers. Just incredibly bad play calling, and Najee Harris got just 6 carries the whole game. So I don't think that lasts, right? I think they're going to lean on the run more. They're going to play good defense. That is how this team is built. And after last week's debacle, something has to change. And Najee Harris historically has been really good against the Browns. He's averaged over 100 rushing yards per game, and he scored a touchdown in each of his 4 career matchups versus the Browns. So plug him into your lineup. Trust the process. I think he will have a really big game in week 2. Next up is Lions rookie running back Jahmyr Gibbs. He gets to go up against the Seattle Seahawks, who have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position since the start of last year. And I know Gibbs got the rookie treatment in week 1. That's normal, right? Rookies get out-snapped and out-carried by their veteran teammate, and that's what happened in week 1. David Montgomery saw the majority of the snaps, majority of the carries, and he did his job just fine. But Jahmyr Gibbs was the much more talented player in the backfield among the two. Gibbs just got 7 carries last week, and he broke off 2 runs of over 15 yards and recorded 6 forced missed tackles on those 7 carries per PFF. So I think the coaching staff is going to see how talented he is. They're going to close that gap a bit in the split between that backfield. And this matchup is just really juicy one. So I expect him to have a much bigger week in his 2nd NFL game. And then last up is Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams. The Titans, he gets to face them this week. And they were the number 1 run defense last year, but the worst pass defense in the league. So I think with Austin Eckler also dealing with an ankle injury where he's missed the last 2 days of practices, we don't even know if he's going to play. I think with the matchup and Austin Eckler's injury, that's going to translate to Justin Herbert passing the ball a lot more than they did in week 1. And per Next Gen Stats, no defense has allowed more deep passing yards and touchdowns than the Titans over the last 2 seasons, while Mike Williams leads the NFL in air yards per target since 2019. This is a matchup made in heaven. And Mike Williams has the potential to finish as the wide receiver 1 this week. Get him into your lineups.
Well, I have got to agree with Michelle on that one, because we just got word a few more minutes ago, a confirmation that Austin Eckler did not practice today, still dealing with that ankle. So in all likelihood, he will not be there for the Chargers to be able to use in their potent offense. But what do you guys think just in terms of where the shift should be made from a fantasy perspective from week 1 to week 2, especially as you guys have both mentioned and we've heard throughout the show, there are so many critical guys who get in the end zone that won't be able to lace up for their teams this weekend.
I'll buy and sell one of Michelle's. I'll buy on Mike Williams. I think that's a great bounce back opportunity. And I do think the big play passing is going to be there. I thought Kellen Moore still called a great game for the Chargers. Case in point, they scored 34 points. They had a great offensive showing. I think they're going to be really difficult to stop even without Eckler. But I'm going to fade Najee Harris a little bit. That Browns defensive line is improved. They have talent. I know Shelby Harris a little banged up right now, but you just look across that defense for Cleveland, and I think they got a much stiffer front 7 and core of the front 7 than what Najee's been used to. And he's posted more career carries against the Browns than any other team thus far in his NFL career. And it's one of the few teams out there that he's been averaging over 4.5 yards per carry against. I think that number comes down, and Najee's always been a volume guy. And I think the emergence of Jaylen Warren as a viable additional threat in the backfield means that I'd probably fade Najee this week in addition because of the matchup against the Browns front 7.
Yeah, that's a fair one.
And I will have to go with Tyler Algier because, like a lot of people, he was just wandering around in like the 8th or 9th round. Like, oh man, everybody want to beat John, get him in the 1st round and all that stuff. Yeah. if Tyler Algier is in that little pool of running backs right there lurking, you better jump on him because he is going to be in the game, and I feel like he's definitely going to get the rock. So I'm buying Tyler Algier all the way.
Yeah, he's one of those who's sneaky good right there at the end zone. You're not going to see him get a whole lot of carries throughout the game, especially because they're getting Cordero Patterson back this week for the Falcons. And so there's going to be an interesting little conundrum that Arthur Smith and company have to figure out. However, Tyler Algier sniffs the end zone and gets in, as we saw in last week's game against the Panthers. So yeah, I like where both you guys are going just in terms of players who can get it done and players who can bounce back. So closing thoughts, guys, anything that you're looking to see this weekend, give me 30 seconds on it.
Should be another really entertaining week of games. I'm really excited for Kansas City and Jacksonville. Did we even talk about that game at all? And that's a big time quarterback showcase. Kansas City's got a lot riding on bouncing back after they lost in Detroit. They get presumably get Kelsey and Jones back. I think I saw a report came through when we first came on the air that they were both confirmed to play on Sunday at 1:00. So that's a big boost for them. That's a playoff caliber potential late bracket playoff matchup in the making. I'm really excited to see that one.
I'm looking for better offensive line play, whether it be the Giants, the Falcons. Like, I'm looking to see these offensive line protect the quarterback because I want to see what these quarterbacks look like. Give them an opportunity to be better. Give Danny Dimes the opportunity to show his skill set, and also Desmond Ridder as well. So yeah, looking for these offensive lines to kind of step up the game a little bit.
Yeah, and we appreciate you guys looking for us to bring you all the tea in the NFL. It's NFL Kickoff Live. We appreciate you guys rocking with us. Come back next week and we'll give you all the news in and around the NFL. I'm Tanitra Batiste, that's Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs. Have a great weekend. See you next time.